Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it interesting that too many of us in our 435-member body spend the 5 minutes of valuable oxygen consumption time talking rather than listening. But it is what it is. We all run every 2 years, and we have to figure out a way to get back here. So let's talk to the folks that are sitting somewhere in a mom and pop restaurant today or in a machine shop that maybe employs 4 or 5 folks. And so if they were listening to this, it's on their lunch break, and all their employees are listening, how much of what has been said here today do you think they would understand as it relates to their daily lives? And are we, whether it be us here on the dais or you at the table, are you actually not necessarily thinking in terms that they will understand, but utilizing examples that small mom and pop business understands? Anybody want to offer comment? Are we in our own little bubble here as we have these high-level philosophical, a lot of cases, non-decision-making discussions? Anybody want to offer comment?
Yeah, Congressman Bergman, thank you. We, just last week, there were about 200 NFIB small business owner members in town, met with many offices, including yours and you. So thank you for meeting with them. But we just encourage them to tell their story, share their story about it. We follow it at a macro level, but we always think the individual stories are much more important. And it was, how tax relief was reinvested back into the people and into their production and not into their...
Have we as the federal government made it too complicated?
Yes, and they do acknowledge that things are very...
So the point is, if we've made it too complicated, if we looked at, and when we talk about corporate taxes, or we talk about taxing the wealthy, which is, I think if I remember in my first term in budget 7 years ago, the math was said if you taxed the wealthiest 1%, 115% of their income, which would seem a little weird, that still didn't even come close to beginning to reducing the national debt. The numbers don't match. It's a nice soundbite to play, but the math doesn't work. So I'd like to hear from whoever wants to offer comment on the following statement. If we eliminated, was it a fair statement to say that corporate income tax is very simply passed along to the end to the consumer? If I'm a business and I pay corporate tax and I do my structure and I do what my market forces will allow me to do as a business, is it fair to say that corporate taxes are passed, those expenses and paying the corporate taxes eventually passed along to the consumer?
Yes, and especially in an environment now where businesses have become as efficient and productive as they possibly can. They're dealing with stubbornly high inflation. Certainly the costs do have to be.
So the point is it time that should we just consider getting rid of the corporate income tax because the consumer pays it anyway? And if you're a corporate executive making $20 million a year, you just pay that tax on it, and that revenue comes direct to the government?
I want to disagree with that. The literature shows, and we talked about this a moment ago, from Treasury, Joint Tax Committee, Congressional Budget Office, shows that about 80% of the corporate income tax is borne by capital. So shareholders generally pay for that, not consumers. Now, the other 20%, 30% is borne by labor and consumers. So there's a portion of it. But the
okay, so when you said borne by capital.
Yeah, the shareholders.
Okay, so the point is, in the long term, if we're trying to create an economy that is streamlined so that people working, whether you're the business owner or just that employee there working there and paying your personal income tax, that you can live the kind of life that your grandparents had hoped for when they were struggling through the 30s and 40s. And I see my time has run out, so I guess we'll have to take that for another time. But I always appreciate, I will always defer to Mr. McClintock because of his ability to take these complex things and break them down for folks like
As much as it pains me to